people get maimed, and people are injured and they're killed. So Bob, who was the founder, and his son-in-law, Eduardo, decided they wanted a better way of doing business. So they came along and they've developed a number of solutions that are remote monitoring. So we use a magnet that attaches to a rail web underneath the rail. And then what it does, it has a PCB board, a SIM card, and then it emits a signal to cell to satellite. And therefore you've got remote management. It's got a thermistor in there. We also do a tilt monitor, which Mark uses very enthusiastically. This is not in the room, I can say that, get away with that. And what that enables people to do is to watch temperatures remotely, safely, and more accurately. Because temperatures, particularly if you're looking at permanent wave, will go up. It gets hotter and hotter because steel will absorb a lot of that heat and it will increase the temperature. So often, particularly with Red Zone working with the fact that Network Rail now doesn't want to send people out in the daytime when there is a problem. They don't want to sell a watchman because of the health issues. This is one of the best ways of doing it. It is a very competitive market. We're the market leaders. We were set up in 2004, so this is our 20th year. And we have a very good reputation because we're always developing. We started off 2004 with a big clamp-on system. Today we have something that's magnetic that you can hold in one hand. Hold in one hand, just put into a magnet. Just attach the web of the rail, also a stanchion of an OLE support where you go. We also do vibrations. So we're now looking, particularly around the London and Dartford areas, around monitoring the health of the web. So the steel vibrations, when there's a flat, for example, there's a flat wheel, when there's scathing, scratching, and also a lot of juddering as well. We can monitor it remotely. So no one has to go and get a big train, book it. They can look at the audio signatures. We also do EWBs, warning boards, so you may have seen them flash. They are a very popular piece of equipment. We have probably around 400 or 500 of each out on the market Network Rail. We also supply Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Spain, and also Norway, which I'm hopefully going out with Eduardo to speak to them about how they can do more. And what we do is these EWBs and temperature and tilt sensors are there to give remote management, so you can sit within the depot every 15 minutes and be able to look at, is it getting hot? Do we then need to do, we get possession, a lot more working. If we have track renewals, and I've just come from a last TME, I won't mention the region to spare them embarrassment, but it's a case of we do track renewals. What's the temperature? Do we need to come back the next time? We can't do daytime possession, we can do nighttime. And we're also working in the Great Western region and the Western Route on monitoring using radar camera flood sites as well. And as Mark will tell you, we're being very efficient, very prompt to getting kit, but I'll let Mark make those comments, not me. So that's what we do. The key factor in railways is we want a safe railway. And the old days where you could get away with accidents, fatalities, and that was part of life, thankfully don't exist anymore. So our role is to make sure that people come home every day, that it's not an event, that it's rare that we have accidents. And we also want to make sure that you can look after the permanent way much more effectively. As we are seeing, there's a lot more investment in rail globally. You only have to take a look at what China is doing. So we have to look, particularly if you're at Saudi Arabia, where we're bidding for contracts at the moment, where we have presence. They want to know how hot it is, but also the level, has it been covered with dust, all these things that we can help with. So the challenge is, how do you do it remotely? How do you do it safely? And also, how do you do it so that it is accurate? So we're product accepting. We've been so for the last 20 years. We have the fun of getting through product acceptance and Network Rail. But what it means is that we understand what the user has to go through. And we also have to understand things like rain, its impact on sensors, and also, which is going to be a lot more important for permanent way, how people can monitor and also how they plan to improve the rail lines and what they need to do. And there's two things that I think people should really sort of reflect on. We don't have any blast furnace anymore. So the rail is now coming from France, where it's joined in France, not in the southeast and the Wessex route where it was. And that means you have to look after the assets a lot more effectively. So we're also looking at vibration to see when they break, what causes it, so they can map the accidents, map the incidents, and therefore they can intervene much more effectively. You look at what we're doing in the Great Western, we don't want trains going through at 120 on floodwaters. We use radar camera. We can then allow people to see what's going on in a safe and timely and efficient manner. If you look at the speed boards, they're very popular because they can be carried in a backpack. What does that mean? It means you can get out there very quickly and you can slow trains down, and you're not relying on whether the AVNet or whether the internal communications has been, because this is railways. Things happen, you've got to intervene. We also work with companies in and around micro CCTV. So we tend to work with companies from defence where we want to spin off some of their technologies into rail. And we've taken an approach that rail has traditionally been quite old-fashioned. We take the approach that we live in a digital world, and a lot of the people who work in the railways are younger permanent engineers, and many people now see the benefits of aerospace and defence technology. And we're also seeing a lot of the peace dividend that came through with elastomeric coating, sensors, for example, GPS coming through. So next iteration of our systems will be vibration sensors and GPS, can do up to 200 millimeters in terms of accuracy, to be able to map and plot and build up not just a digital railway, but a railway that can help people map out where they can do their engineering effectively, and also how they produce a railway that will be used more effectively and more often. What we're seeing, and we've seen this with the Elizabeth line where we're doing trials of micro CCTV, is that people do not want to send someone down on a midnight shift. It's dangerous. It doesn't really help a lot of people. If they can look at it remotely when there's an event, they can understand what's going on. So it's about preventative, predictive, and timely intervention and intelligence and gathering all that data. I had someone who is a potential customer. They got very excited. Oh, the Shadow Minister of Rail wants to do something about rail. And I smiled to him and said, most people say that when they're in opposition, when they get into government, they have to deal with the realities that we're looking at a world where more people will travel by train, more freight will travel by train, and more people want to travel by train. That means more use than we thought in the 1980s and 1990s. And it also means that we have to intervene in a more timely manner. We're hiring a lot more engineers, Network Rail is hiring and training them. They want to be able to come home safe. They want to have a career. That means they need to know a lot more information than they're currently getting from the old traditional manual methods. They have skilled staff. They want to retain them. They want to keep them and use them in the best way. So that's what we do at Yeltec. We manufacture devices in the UK. That is often a very big selling point. We also have our own factory based in Chichester, nowhere near a railway line, so we're a railway engineering company. And we also manufacture and develop and test in the UK. So we're using a lot of heritage line to do that, the sandbag testing, the sand pit testing, and we want to come into Network Rail and then give them a trial, then hopefully get a product accepted across the road. This is really the future. We have in the UK more interest in trains, more interest in rail, and less tolerance of things like speed restrictions that hit me in the morning, hence I'm running slightly late, and also less tolerance for the public about poorly running trains. So what we want and what people are trying to push towards is a more predictive, smarter, agile rail. People aren't interested in the old Georgian technologies and the Victorian legacy that we left. They want to look at a more modern world, a world that can allow more freight, more people to move by trains faster and at a greater response. And that's where predictive systems like Yeltec work. And our history means that we're always developing, we're always going down to places, exotic places like Swindon to see Mark and Chris and other people. I always remember somebody told me, do you actually like going down to Swindon? And I said, yes, the company's better than the town. But what we've found is that there's a lot more appetite for technology and the adoption of technology and developing technology. We're living in a world now where there's a lot more technology available. You know, we print through 3D printing, AMLS and DMLS, some of our test equipment. Now, we wouldn't have done that 5 years ago. We wouldn't have done that a decade ago. But that is also means that we can be able to print sensors, unique housings, all these things, and get it tested and rectified very quickly. So there is a digital revolution and a manufacturing revolution that we can hopefully harness. And it's important that people begin to realise, as they are slowly. I mean, today I was at a meeting with Thames. Their renewal engineers said to me they're actually using our thermometers and manual thermometers and looking. At the end of the day, he wants his engineers to come home safe and sound rather than be in the depot looking, and when they do a nighttime possession, they know what the data is. And it's also because we have to shepherd the resources that we have for the rails more efficient. And that's one thing that I saw. I remember when I travelled in British Rail in the late 1980s, health and safety was either bright red jumper, that was my school uniform, and the railway person, this is Horsley, some of you might know it, 2 third rail lines. He didn't shut it down. Somebody had dropped a jumper on one of the live third rails, jumped down and retrieved it. And my role, because it's a bright red blazer, was to make sure the train driver knew that. Now, that isn't acceptable now. British Rail, you could get away with it. Now you can't. And so we're living in a world now, particularly from China, particularly with all the development that they're doing. They're more aggressive about their approach, and Yeltec reflects that by being able to develop more efficient, more capable solutions. Thank you. We'll have a look at some.
Well, there's the rest of the slides.
Thank you. These are the slide decks my marketing lady set up. These are the EWBs. Very simple. You can carry them on the back. They've got back straps. They're lighter than the competition. 2 lights. They run on a lithium battery. We also do sensors, so people don't have to go and physically see whether they're working or not. They can tell that remotely from an app, from a mobile app. That's our temperature monitoring solution. We have been told that the engineer who left that mobile number wasn't so impressed about that, so hence we've blurred that for GDPR. That's how simple it is. A lot of people will try and attempt to have a smaller battery. That doesn't really happen on modern railway. It isn't clamped because that takes time. That requires a lot of unearthing. We also do CCTVs, and we're also working on vibration sensors that are ATEX rated that look at vibration and temperature, relay that to a gateway, and then broadcast that to a website, and then you get alerts through emails or mobile phones. That's how simple we are. We also do solar cameras, which Mark will be trialing soon. Those are the EWBs with a charging stand. We do that because a lot of people put them outside in those wonderful beaching legacy sheds or containers, as they're called. And the multi-pin, we've seen one with 1 multi-pin, 12 multi-pin outlets, and about 20 devices. So we put that, which is a lot safer. That was developed in partnership with a lot of engineers in the Wessex region and Southern region because they asked us and we responded. That's one of our RCMUs, and that has GPS that will broadcast once every 24 hours where it is. And then this is what we do. So we do the warning boards, we do point heatings. So in Wales, where you've got lines which are very difficult to get access to, it's one transformer. It doesn't need a kiosk because the controls are already in the cabinet. And that then allows you to heat lines. So we're also developing a solar diesel with Sunbelt to be able to run them efficiently in Wales and in difficult areas. We do CCTVs. We've got micro CCTVs as well. Vibration, we've got 2, one from Pepperfuch, one from Yeltec. We do balance weight monitoring for the pig tie and radar, and we do tilt. Tilt's quite interesting, particularly as we're going electric. You need a lot of OLEs. That would be the simplest, safest way. You don't have third lines. You don't have the risk of death to that extent. There'll be a lot more OLE development, and we're finding that's getting a lot of interest. But also, heritage lines realise that the gift of the Victorians, London clay, nobody wants it, nobody cares about it, except the railways. They stick this in, and they're able to look at the tilt more effectively and do so remotely. So we've already got that in Severn Valley, and apparently that's working very well. We do a family of systems. That and the RCMU are the same. We also do a void sensor, which is plain line, and we do one that fits underneath stainless and manganese as well.
Sorry, where you were, you've got something there, bridge condition monitoring.
Yes, so we do fibre optics that can be bonded on, or we do cameras that will monitor it, or we do vibration sensors, or we do our RTK sensors as well. So the reason why we do bridge, one for strike, one for cracking and vibration. A lot of the bridges are Victorian or they're Georgian. They're built the Georgian way through brick and they're covered. They will move because they're not designed 10 services a day coming through the Severn bridge at 120 miles an hour. For an Nelthorpe, it'd be 50 and they'll be doing it once a day. So there's a lot of vibrations that we're looking at. So they want to look at that as well.
The rail web monitoring, how you say they're not clamped on, how are they fastened then?
Magnetic.
Because good on, right.
Yeah, it's a 65-ton resistance force. So
It's strong people who do it then.
well, they're network rail engineers, so I say they're strong enough, but it's designed to stay on, particularly in a web. If you clamp the problems, you'll work it through. So initially we had a clamp system, then we moved to magnetic because it's much more efficient. We use a fishing hook. That's much more effective, and that also stays on, and you don't need to prepare the surface at all. It goes straight on. So today in the morning, I was with a conference of TMEs and ATMEs and the section managers. We gave it, and their previous system that they're using at the moment is they had to clamp it. There's a lot of work. That is put a magnet, and we showed them on the table leg. Just put it on there, and that was it. So that takes away 10-15 minutes of work. And that's why we use a magnet, because it's easier. You don't have to prepare the surface. The magnetic rails, the traditional steel that you've got, that works. If there are stainless steel sections or if they're manganese, we then have a voice sensor that we're developing fitting. Weather stations and dockings, I think that's doing very well. You tend to find the tilt's very popular. There's a lot of OLE and high-speed OLE. So they don't really want to come out to site. So there's a lot that we're selling at the moment up north in Darlington. There's a lot in Luton. The warning boards are also very popular because you can put them on your back. They've got straps, put them there and fix them through standard network rail, square section fiberglass grating poles. Simple.
Just a point on the EWB,
Yeah.
if I may. How do they tie into the different signalling systems?
At the moment, all they do, they just submit a light, and then the permanent way team who put them out have a website where it's located. So they would then, I would imagine, from what I haven't been told, but I would imagine they would then tell the signalling staff where it is. This is really, when you've done some work on the permanent way, this is there just as a light, just to tell people to slow down or that there's work done to slow it
They
down.
won't do that unless it's tied in with signalling.
I think they do. They tell the signalling team what's gone. As far that's the first time I've heard that question. But as far as I'm aware, from what we're told, they come out when they've done a planned piece of work. They then put that there. They then have access to where it's mapped, and then I would imagine they would then tell the signalling team.
Yeah, because it's a dual purpose in effect.
Yes.
The two disciplines have to do those things together.
Yeah. We sell this into permanent way. We don't usually get involved in signalling with this. And I think the assumption is that permanent would have told signalling where it is, but they can access it through the web. We have a web portal where they can access it, or one of the permanent way people will get them access. I think, Mark, that's what you do for some of your regions, don't you?
So covered range, but in terms of those early warning boards, they are generally used for where there's an emergency issue. So, for example, a defective rail that required a 5 mile an hour in position speed. Those are erected on the approach to the obstruction or the effective infrastructure, and then you will have the warning boards in terms of the commencement board with the speed displayed and the termination board. So these are just a more efficient way of laying out emergency protection, basically for a advanced.
But that has to be tied into signalling system. And the driver cancels his warning system in this case, so it's his notice thing.
Yeah. If it's flat, they also have to report it to us. If it falls down on the ground, they then report that as well if that's fallen down. But the advantage of this one,
Put a few warning boards.
this one is light enough that it's carried at the back. It's got straps in there, and it's got a battery monitor as well, because it's lithium ion. But it's a very popular piece of kit. Simple, lighter than the rest. And again, because of lithium, that's enabled us to do a lot of work. That's a web page. So you will see the EWBs will be there. Access it so it's secure. Get a map. get locations where they are, and then you're able to take it, looking at warning temps, then it sends you an email, sends, so you got proof that it's done its job, sends an email out. Then if you want to contact us, you've got the QR code, and then you've got our address as well, which is the Regis office, but we've got a plant in Chichester, and we also manufacture kit.
What you'll listen.
Yes, that's all right. That's all we need. We do a range of sensors, a range of warning boards, and then we're also developing CCTV solutions, and then a number of other predictive solutions as well, preventative solutions.
Okay. Any questions?
Malcolm, just started off, because I think we could perhaps have quite a nice debate about, about things. I'm all for monitoring systems, that's absolutely fine. I would have, during my time, I would have loved to have had things like temperature monitoring and this sort of thing. There's one thing that's missing in all this, and that is that whoever is receiving that information has to understand what they're actually receiving, plus the fact they have to know what that piece of railway actually looks like. And you don't do that by not being out there and having a look at it.
Yeah. So
all is what the temperature tells you is only yes or no, it exceeds the critical well temperature. It doesn't tell you, and that will say to you, you have to put a speed restriction on.
correct.
That is not right. If you happen to be an experienced permanent way engineer, you will make other decisions which will make you decide whether you are going to observe that particular temperature.
So what you've explained very kindly is the mosaic of how you make those decisions. What this does, it enables them to take part of that decision, so an experienced permanent way engineer would then do the dash fire. So that's where we come in terms of how they then inspect that. So if they've got that there, exceeded the temperature, then what we do, we're developing a radar-based solution. It will tell you whether it's buckled or not. So as technology develops, we're able to put in that condition so that you can do your job, but do it remotely and therefore do it safely, because a lot of the buckling will happen when it's nighttime, it's remote, it's in a hot area, or let's say what usually happens, what we found is they've cleared the vegetation but not told you. They're told signalling because the vegetation get involved in the signalling system, but not you. So this allows you to at least start to make that process. Do you need to come out and keep it there? We don't offer the whole solution. We wish we would, but what our job is, get the warning out, do so in a safe manner, and then you as a permanent way team can then figure out, do I need to put a speed restriction in, or is it a case of we tell signalling, we tell the scheduling team, not today, you know, vegetation has been moved, therefore it's getting hotter, change the system. But we're part of that mosaic to allow you to do that in a more safe and efficient way. And we've got modern technology that allows you to do that. Will we replace a permanent way engineer? No, we just simply give you more tools for a TME or an ATME or a section manager to do so in a more effective way.
I think if I can add to that, just to stimulate a debate, I guess. In terms of these pieces of equipment, they're great. We've got one coming for here in Branch Level Crossing for some flood monitoring, but they're not, as Malcolm said, the whole solution.
No.
They need to be used and interpreted by experienced, capable, competent people.
Yeah.
I think harsh reality, unfortunately, is if I want to go and look at something on the infrastructure, probably I'm an exception because it's drainage is generally on the side, it says, but for the track engineer, especially, red zone working, school working with warning has become this horrible thing that nobody wants to do. Naturally, I probably disagree with that a little bit, and it's not necessarily unsafe, but regardless, we're limiting the amount of time that people actually have to go boots on ballast to look at the infrastructure, to look at the track. So this only replaces that piece of the jigsaw puzzle in terms of having some data back. You still then need the track engineer to say, actually, we know that site, we know the behaviour, the ballast shoulders are in good condition, therefore we can continue at this speed, or yes, we need to do something. It does raise a wider point around the sheer quantity of information that's received back now. We've got very skilled at telling people what's going wrong. So tilt sensors for earthwork movement, for example.
Yes.
They're great. We've got a site on the 7 estuary, on the line between Chepstow and Newport. But that site is continuously moving. There are tilt sensors. There's 33 of them in the slope. And you know what? They give us such a pain, and they give us so many readings that actually it's just becoming so overwhelming that you are struggling and hard pressed sometimes to know whether it's a genuine movement or whether it's a one-off. So
Yeah.
that does become this kind of it's an important point you make, that it's not just we've got the information, therefore it's all going to be better.
So when we supplied them, not with a tilt sensor, we walk them through, we got a manual, which we emailed them, but we also walk them through, we sit with them physically and say, this is what it does. And then you can configure the warnings. And then that helps you reduce that overload. So particularly for us, because of the way that we're set up, the remote monitoring system with the web page and the mobile access, you can set the warnings, then you can set where you go, you can set the parameters like that, and it will tell you in red, it will send you a warning. So you're not overwhelmed with data, but also for you, you can then make that data. You can go back and capture that data in the past and say, those ballast shoulders were good because there was enough rain, the soil had enough water locked into it, or it's a very dry day, for example, or they cleared out roots, and therefore the ballast shoulder dropped because previous red zone working time, previous track renewal didn't accumulate or didn't accommodate for that fact because they didn't think it would be cleared. So it gives you the information. It's how you deal with that information. And what we do that we provide you with the first part of that, and first part of it is jigsaw puzzles. So you got the outside done, then you can then figure out yourself how you do that. But we give you the tools to do. So in Norway, for example, where I think they've got an order for about 10 or 15, that's in the Arctic Circle. Do we want to put an engineer out there? No. What we want is an engineer to make those educated decisions. The way that we do that is to give them a solution that can do so remotely in a nice warm environment.
We've got somebody from home, Mike Lipscomb. You want to
Hello, Mike.
put a question forward?
Yeah, hi. So yeah, great kit. Gives Network Rail the ability to understand the state of their infrastructure in real time and so on. But I'm wondering, what's your thoughts about how, as an organisation, it's able and ready to actually act on that information, to assimilate it, and then distribute it to the people that need to have it? Or do you? How does your kit interact with the boots on the ground? Does it go through a sort of central control center somewhere, which then has to direct it to relevant people, or are you very much working with individual local maintenance groups within the regions? Does Network Rail need to develop its ability to take this information and use it effectively? Do you feel that there's some work on their side that needs to be done to use this type of equipment to the best advantage?
Well, I think you'll find that you've answered your own question, and as a salesman, that's fantastic because I can just sit and listen. What we find is that when we sell them, and I'll give you a good example. I went to Wessex when I first joined, and we sat down and they showed me a manual thermometer, as you do. Got one at the back of the van. It was in Wimbledon, and I said, "Well, this is nuts. You know, this is the 21st century." And then I showed them the web page that you see there. And what we do is we say, here's a section management team. You decide who gets the warnings. As Mike has said, as Malcolm has said, you know, it's a part of a mosaic. I need the right people to know that information and have a record that it is. So what we tend to do is we did with the TMEs and the ATME section managers, we got them in a room. Then when they buy them, they will usually sit them in a room and say, right, so many people need to be emailed. Here are the warning limits. And away we go. So what we'd like Network Rail to do is do what we did today. Just get everybody in a room and say, these are the warnings you're getting at the levels. Then, as Malcolm said, you make those informed, educated guesses. And I think with AI, people get quite scared of AI, but they shouldn't be. AI simply gives you more opportunities to capture that data and make people think what they do with that data. I think Malcolm is right. Computers can't, and Mark is right. Computers will never replace human beings. My father's a professor of AI. And, I remember someone telling him in the 1980s, computers will run everything. And there was a big push in the 80s, network, British Rail, fibre optics, and then you'd have a fully digital railway. And, my father said, AI is based on what humans think are perfect. So again, as Malcolm said, it won't replace what you're doing. What it will just give you more educated guess. And that's what we do. The best practice, and what we'd like Network Rail to do is sit their engineers and say, here's the technology, this is what you do. When you get a new ATME who's used our technology and they've gone to a different depot, that's what we find is the question that you've asked me is what they pose to the head workers, the track renewal team. What do you do? And so I've sat in offices in Kent where I've gone, my boss used your system. Can we do the same? And then how do we get warnings?
Right.
Can we get warnings? Do we have to be around a laptop? No, it's actually on any mobile, and you can use it on Chrome, you can use it on Google, and all these good things. So it's a case of it's the individual depot and the individual culture that says, here's a piece of technology, how do we use it? To make us make better decisions or make decisions in, the thick of it.
Yeah, so at the moment, the implementation sounds to be very much down to particular individual, more innovative bits of Network Rail, as opposed to sort of like a nationwide sort of policy that's being enacted across the network. That if you're a particularly kind of switched on local section, maintenance section, that you'll kind of talk to you guys and get involved, but it's not kind of joined up across the network yet.
I think, well, I'm a salesman, so I like to think that I can convince people to be switched on. What I would say is it's joined up, but not sort of in a conscious way. People are thinking about it. They go, "Oh, could we? Can we do this?" And they phone us up, or they phone up other people, or they've used it at one depot, and they go, "Well, can we not use it?" It's usually as when you join a new depot, your boss and the people who work with you will say, do we need to do it this way? You will question them. So there is, in a very sort of subconscious manner, people are sort of doing it in a joined up way. They see Western do it, they see Wessex in and out do it. So, for example, we've now announced that we can lease for Sunbelt. Now, you'd have thought, if you took your question at face value, different routes wouldn't think about the same thing, but they are. Can we lease it? That's a question they've asked. Yeah, you can. That we sorted that bit out. Oh, well, if we lease Sunbelt, can Sunbelt see our data? Well, we have to create, as we have done, individual user groups. So there's an unconscious way, and if you've been in railways, you know this better than most people. And in my family, I see that they sort of work together and they sort of come up with the same solutions. And then it depends whether they mesh. But it's not just an innovative engineer, it's usually business performance or people who've seen us at rail live, and they've seen me dive a suntan, or the marketing ladies who we had to ensure had lots of water. People come by and they look at it and it's an idea. Well, you tend, as in railway, it's yin and yang. They're either very technically advanced, or the organisation has no other choice but to do that. Like, do you want people acting like solar watchmen? That's a waste of a good engineer. And someone like Malcolm, is that something that he wants to budget for? Well, there's other things that man can do. Those skilled people, men and women, can do much more effectively in the railway. So I tend to find when I go up and down the country on trains, is they have to do it. There's an unconscious way of them thinking about it. I think what Network Rail will be better off doing is doing what I've seen in other businesses where they say to people, how can we be better? How can we be safer? Put it into a challenge, like a hackathon. That's what I've seen in retail myself, and give people a chance. Let people come up with the problems as Malcolm has done, and as Mark has done, explain the logic so everybody understands, and you'll see a more joined up approach than come out as a result.
Yeah, it does sound like it's the troops on the ground that are being the innovative ones and finding solutions. It doesn't sound so much like there's leadership coming from the top, but it's actually coming from the ground up. So it'd be nice to sort of see a more
I think what you'll find,
higher up approach.
We've got very innovative senior management like Mark in the room who is taking a lead. I'll just say that before I get a kicking. What I would also say is Some of the people who want to know about it are the ATMEs and the IMEs. So I'll sit down and talk to them about what they want. And then they filter that down. What we'll tend to find is sometimes a trap worker is saying, this is nuts. Why am I looking at a manual thermometer? I've got other things to do. And they'll say, well, we hand it over. Or, I've had conversations with the contractors and they go, this is nuts. Why are we working in a Georgian way? Then they feed that up to the ATME, then the IME, then the business, because we have to make a business case with them. People put it in. So it's a mix of both. I think the future will be is Network Rail will have to say, right, how do we conserve the railway lines, the actual webs, and the infrastructure and get it to work better, and then that will force a more joint approach, might be.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks. Thank you.
Do you have any discussions or input with technical authority in terms of the central team? Because I'm certain somewhere along the line, if they've gone through the process with you, which I understand the payment for the product, etc., and presumably somebody, Milton Keynes or wherever they are now, has gone, actually, this is a good thing, we can use this, and therefore, I'm not tracking it here, but you would like to think somewhere in a standard it says one of the options you've got is a remote monitor. It may not be Yeltec, there may be others, I don't know. But has Yeltec considered perhaps pushing the point? Technical authority go, this is nuts. You got it here, you bought it, coordinate it, which actually ends up more sales.
I'll get into trouble if that happened. What we've found is that we do talk to Milton Keynes, James McNamee and Richard Gibson, and they've said that, as your guest said about, as well, I mentioned the 15 minutes, that's come from Milton Keynes. So they know the technology is there, how they use it, and give people the opportunities to use that. So they are driving some of that conversation. They're driving a lot of interesting conversations about buckling. That's how I know. I only get involved when we've done PA testing with some of the Milton Keynes people and the development people. So it's a case of they've got an overview. They want to do the 15 minutes. And so they're driving that agenda. Then it's filtering down. And then people say, well, I think 15 minutes means this. I think 15 minutes means that. Or 15 minutes to high risk zone. So I'll send up Solar Watchman out with a magnetic thermometer. And that doesn't really work anymore. So they then are forced to. I think it's how Network Rail, and they're very good at this, communicating it and then listening to people on the ground. We're in a building, there's a lot of message about inclusion, and quite rightly so. They're trying to do that, and they're doing it very well, I might add, is saying, we've got this technology, use it. Don't do the old way. And let's be smarter, let's be more efficient and safer about it so that we can deliver a railway that works. You've seen in the headlines about shadow ministers talking about nationalising railway, and then what's come out is they've been told by some management consultant, oh, it's not, why do we have an infrastructure railway? That's because you need an infrastructure for a railway to work. And that's because Network Rail is able to offer that vision of how you do that. So that's my answer to the questions. They are doing it, and they're very good at getting that message out, because we get calls from people saying, I've seen this Network Rail flyer up, I've seen this, I've seen other people do that. It's, I think, the way that they move that forward is a more cohesive, stronger message with a lot more internal marketing.
Can I ask,
Yes.
just picking up this thread about confidence and judgment? Okay, more and more sophisticated and excellent equipment. Do you detect a sort of, or do you think there are adequate mechanisms in the working world to make sure that one doesn't become too reliant on them? I can imagine that, let me paint a picture that's maybe completely wrong, but someone who's very experienced might be quite not cynical, but quite sort of thoughtful about whether the data is correct. But someone who's brought up in the digital world, might they put perhaps too much reliance on the data? And then there's always the pressures of having too many things to do anyway. So it must be okay. The data's saying it's okay. Do you think there are mechanisms in place to make sure that the wrong judgments don't get made?
I think there is enough. Network Rail is very good at understanding that risk, and we're very good at providing that. what we found is when I sold to people who you might call Generation Z or Y,
Yes.
and no one here looks older than 30 anyway.
That's right. Of course.
What we found is that because their world is now more digital, they understand what their digital message is and the pitfalls and benefits of it. And what you're seeing is a blended reality. They're being able to look at the digital, and then we got people saying, you know what Waqas is? It's reading 40. Well, that's why I put it underneath. We go, no, you should do that. You should really put it in the web where you get it right. But they say, well, we know it gets hotter. We know why it's getting hotter. So there's a case of that. What the technology does, in response to Malcolm's question, is it gives the information to make the judgment. And then if you're digitally native, you know the technology will have limits because you know in 2 years' time something else will come. Which is why we're always developing new units, which is why the EPC has been so thoroughly tested. So it's a case of, I think, that there's enough people around, particularly the digital native, the younger PTMEs that are coming that I've seen, where they'll get an experienced track engineer in to do the sales, and when I do the sales pitch, to come in and ask me difficult questions because they know about it. If it's someone older than younger engineers, what they'll say is, okay, yeah, you know, right, you're telling me this, how do I know it's accurate? So they understand the pitfalls. You know, we live in a world now where people are aware, particularly with fake news, fake media, and social media, that, you know, technology will help you to achieve a purpose. It's not the purpose, it's not the end, but it's a means to an end. You know, when I started traveling on British Rail when I was 8 on my own, you know, the old fashioned policy was if you're a young child, so one of the station masters would walk you through. When I started traveling, there were clapboards that would tell you what the next station was. 5 years there were TV screens, and people didn't just say, "Oh, the TV screen's as accurate as a clapboard." Most people were glad to get rid of the clapboard because, you know, if someone forgot, that was it. People took them on the train. So, and these things have happened. But I think as people get more experience with digital technology, they become more effective at asking what it can and cannot do, and then they make up a decision. And that's what I've seen. So when I sell a digital native, as you might call it, and wrongly so, they will ask questions about parameters and this. Somebody who isn't, what you might not think is, will actually say, yes, actually, you know, I think manually goes so far. They know the limits. I think having sold software for a quarter of a century, it changes to the point because people know what the limits are, so they keep asking for different things. So I don't think we'll ever have that trap. I think those who are technical, who are reliant on the software, will find that they'll get questioned, particularly network provider. Why are we putting those track engineers on that section? We know it's more fraud.
If they're coming over as being reliant on it, they'll get challenged.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we're seeing that when we sell them. I mean, you know, is it everyone's dream through that salesman turns up at their depot and sells them stuff? No. But what we tend to find is they're very good at sort of understanding the technology. They ask us and we walk them through and tell what it can and cannot do. So GPS, for example, we use it on a SIM card, but we're developing stuff on RCK. So we are deal with Thames. So we understand those differences. They know that, okay, they've got to check where it's last been. And we showed the alias, for example, call it this last recorded position. That works. Now we've got GPS at sensor 1 to 24. That makes the job easier, but they still go out and check. You know, they do possessions, they do track renewals. They'll tell someone. Someone will come and double check, or someone will come and check where it's there. Or what usually happens is someone from the depot says, I need to do a track renewal. Can you do me a favour? Can you take the RCMU out, put it to another section? Then we get a phone call, we can't find it. That's because someone has not told them. It's you know, the British Rail traditions that carry on, such as people borrowing stuff and then forgetting to put it down in paper. But that's because they trust each other. And they know they need a solution. How they deliver that solution is, again, with digital, physical, old-fashioned. It doesn't really matter. Does it do the job? Mm-hmm. So you find that particularly in that regard, they will sort of question each other. And we found that when we do sales pitches.
With these rail temperature monitors, see,
Yes.
there, can you drill into that and take, or is that purely a location?
You can drill it. So what happens is you go to the users, log onto your devices, and then it will come up the dashboard. And that dashboard you click on, and then it will show you the graph, and then you've got historical data that you can mine into. You've got your control panel, and then you've got your data that tells you the location, the device, the battery health, and all that kind of
So you
stuff.
can see how far back it's recorded.
Yeah. So as long as it's recorded, we'll record it, and then you've got a data table where you can then send it to your business analyst to say, yes, you can do that. So it's one of the reasons why they did it. So people like Malcolm got that data when, let's say if you move depot, you won't have the historical data, but you need to look at it to make a decision.
Okay, and how reliable is it? Because, you know, they push all this business with smart electricity meters or smart gas meters. And every time you start drilling, you know, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. It's not available. And
Well, we've gone through the entertainment called product acceptance. And I have white hair and it's beginning to, so I've had to do DFR part training. So we've had it tested rigorously. So what they'll do, they'll put it on an active track section, as Mark will do with our systems, and test it against the manual method, and then they find out what's accurate and not accurate. If people come back, we usually ask them, it's usually they've not expected it to go over temperature, or they're not expected that tilt. And that's often because someone's done track renewal and said, right, now we've got to do this, and then otherwise we hit the red zone. So you tend to find that if there are variances, there's a logical reason. But because we've tested it very thoroughly for product acceptance, we don't usually tend to get that because our stuff has to work and it's proven. One of the good things about Network Rail and about product acceptance is it's tested and tested again and again, and the design review process is very good. It makes people like us ask those questions to our suppliers so that we then find out, which is why we go to defence, which is why we go to aerospace and space technologies and say, can you do an ultra capacitor that can cope? Yes, it's in space and then it's facing the sun, then it's not facing the sun. It's got to work. And it's got to be reliable. How do you know that data is accurate? Well, here's the underwriter laboratory test that proves it, or here's this test that proves it.
I think,
go on.
what I think what we're probably trying to say to you is that this sort of technology is replacing at to a really great extent and giving us information which took a lot of gathering in the past. And let's accept that it's going to be really totally reliable. That's absolutely fine. What I think or particularly my point is with it, and I don't want to go back to comparison, it's just how things have changed over the years. The systems that we had for inspection and its follow-up, which is the most important thing, right? And working out a programme for future years and so on, whether it be maintenance or renewals, was well defined in British Rail days and had been been refined as well over the years to suit the changes, like changing from jointed track to CWR, all those sorts of things. And all the systems were evolved and amplified really from what they were to suit the changing conditions. The important thing about all that was that a lot of people had a lot of knowledge about those areas of track. Right, that it was a fact. That's what you did, and so did the single engineer. So did the overhead line engineer. So did the bridge engineer. All you had real knowledge from top to bottom of what was going off on that section. Right, now things have changed over the years, and we've now got available to us things which I started looking at in the mid 1990s, where we were looking at video recordings, those sorts of things. And even in those days, with camera, with the position of the camera, sort of thing, the speed was. It had obviously got potential, but it certainly wasn't perfect and didn't replace your manual inspections. It couldn't do so. But I've seen over the years that it has replaced that. Now, the other change has been is that particularly on the main route, we've now got very long sections which are can be inspected almost by exception In other words, as your track recording vehicles and so on, and the video recording and so on go through it, they're only looking for changes. That's all it is.
Yeah.
They're not looking for actual conditions as such.
Yeah.
It isn't like that. But much of our railway is still not like that. It's got variable types of track in it. You know, you take the line from, say, Doncaster across to Cleethorpes, those sort of things. And you won't go more than a mile before there's a change of fastenings, change of sleeper, all this sort of thing.
You can tell.
Trying to replace that with some of the technology is very, very difficult. Now, I see where you're coming from with this, and it has got real application. I would have loved to have had this in places where I could have immediately seen what was happening with rail temperature and so on, those sort of things. I would have really liked to have had that information, but I still could get that information because I sent people out to get it.
Yeah.
So you're only making the same decisions in the end, you see.
What you have to bear in mind is that we're not going to replace people. All we do is make it safer and easier for them to. We're not going to try and replace the bridging engineer.
Make it safer for who? We're trying to make a safe railway.
Yes.
That includes
And the servants and people like that. It's a case of there is technology, and but we're not going to replace the experienced engineers. We're not going to do that. We don't want to do that.
Where's their experience coming from?
Well, you've got to ask Network Rail where their experience is coming from. We don't make that decision.
I think
They buy our equipment because they're very good. That's what I said.
that's how I'm hogging the.
No, I'm totally with you on this. I think what I'm hearing is that actually the problem we're teasing through here is not the LTEX problem.
No.
You've got the technology.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is an organisational problem with the industry we have today and the way the industry is set up. I wish I could accept your comment that AI won't replace people.
No.
I'm cynical about that
Yeah.
because we are cost driven as an industry. We already know that the amount of input around permanent way is being scaled back. People are being made redundant, and people who don't understand the infrastructure are making decisions. And if they see a way, we've got AI can make the decisions for us, and we don't need people to make the decisions. And I think, if I may just do one final point, is I think we have largely lost the ability to make engineering judgment. Because Malcolm, as you said, you had people on the ground who understood a limited patch of railway and knew it inside out. So they knew the history. They knew when it was tamped.
Yeah.
They knew when they replaced a broken rail. They know the ballast conditions. They know where the risks are depending on the geography and all the surrounding ambient conditions. And I think as an industry, tragically, we have lost a lot of that ability to make engineering judgment. And I don't know how we replace it. So it's awfully cynical.
No, it's cynical, but you have to bear in mind, if you look at, I mean, my dad is a fellow at Trinity College Dublin for AI. He's written 3 books. The first was written in '84, machine learning. It's Oxford came. It was at Oxford University. I think the last one, social media, talking about points that you're raising, was in 2018. And those books talk about the same thing. The irony about these books is that they're read by people, because the challenges of AI are that we need 80,000 engineers in the UK alone, from one figure that I've read and that I know about, because you need people to make AI. If you look at Network Rail, from what I've seen, they are trying to bring in the engineers. I think what you're talking about is you had a British Rail that I saw when I was a brain, and we have family friends who worked there, so I knew, where you had track gangs who got one patch and knew that patch. Then you had rail track, and that was rid of. It's like when stagecoaches came along, they got rid of all the experienced train drivers. Why did they do that? Because they thought the pension regulations had changed and they made that choice. Why did rail track get rid of the gang system? Because somebody probably had an idea. They were tired of dealing with the same people, and they thought this is a great way. They would look really good. We're living in a world now where Network Rail, from what I can see, is making a big stride to try and bring those people back. Technology to where helping them do that job. And it's a case of, what you will find is that those people will be held up in select committee. You've seen what's happened with Verizon. They thought technology a horizon. They thought technology would work. Then I just, well, hang on a minute. Are you sure? Who told you? Oh, the computer did. Was the computer accurate? No. It's like, when people tell my dad, oh, I've seen Terminator. Yeah, but Terminator needed lots of IT programmers, and they're in short supply. It's like when he talks to, I mean, half his lot go to Google because it's in Dublin. That's where he is. And what does Google want them to do? They want to do manual inputs, and then they want to try and keep them because they want the experienced engineers. People understand at sea level now, and particularly network rail, you need those engineers. And it's a case of trying to deal with historical things that one in the UK, engineering wasn't that well promoted. If my dad's courses have been people who, said, oh, I want to do engineering. Their parents said, no, do something safe. I'll make you money. It's computing and engineering. And then you now see people say, well, actually, I want to be an engineer because I can 3D print stuff. It's not the oily rag job anymore. It's partly in the UK, one of culture that people didn't want to be engineers. People didn't want to be in the railways. Now they do because network rail and a number of people are trying to address the concerns that you've got. The issues about getting rid of people is I suspect one of rail track, they got rid of the local gang system where they worked their patch, they knew what was going on. If you look, when I travelled in Pakistan many, many years ago, you see people walking up and down, permanent way people. They knew that track, they knew it very well. You see that when you see particularly the Chinese investment embrace, they're trying to build that system in. You've got to bear in mind that we have a population where they expect to come home, they don't really like nighttime working. So you've got a number of challenges, and technology helps them address some of that, but it gives them time to then figure out what they then do. Well, I've sold IT solutions for 25 years, and I always sit down with people, and the first thing after listening to them is saying, what do you actually want to do? What do your people want to do? We sold into London Underground Google. They got very excited. They sent 5 people to Google, going Google event. And I said to them, what do you want to do? Well, we want to be able to sell the chippy that they're doing electrical work, so they can't come there with power tools at a risk of spark. Put it on a web page. You're not replacing the chippy. You're not replacing the sparky. You get it to work together. And I think what you'll find is at the C level in these organisations, particularly now with the horizon coming up, they'll be asked, what is that technology trying to achieve? And then they'll have to think about that. And that's what they're doing. If you look at Network Rail, and I talk to them every day, and they have a wonderful habit of phoning people up at 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning. They get slightly shocked when I phone them back because they're not used to that. But one thing I do find is they are trying to address a skills gap, but that was created by rail track when they got rid of that local gang system, and then with privatisation, where they saw there was a pension change, get rid of them. And then what they thought was they'd come back as consultants. Now, you and I both know when someone gets redundancy, they retire, they don't want to come back and work in these very tough, difficult environments. They've had the politics, they've had a lot of the changes, and privatisation wasn't the sort of world that people want, which is why now I suspect it will go back to GBL. And I think what GBL will do is address your issue and attract those engineers, but they'll want the digital tools. So we're not replacing people. We're not trying to augment or try and put a sticky plaster. We're trying to make sure that they're ready for the next 100, 200 years. The railway system that my great-grandfather works in was steam. And so when my mother went to see him, they were put into a railway coach well away from where the steam engine was, because you get coals, particles in your eyes. So it was a big problem. People romanticize about steam. When people put an electrical diesel train, they loved it. It was clean, it's quiet, you could have a conversation. And you could have a conversation on the track without getting lots of hot water or hot steam. Things change. And I think, we're trying to help that change. And Network Rail is doing a pretty good job of getting those engineers back in, giving them the experience and the time to do them.
Yeah, I don't know, but with you, in actual fact, and there's no conflict here with
No,
it.
no,
I think there is.
Welcome question.
That's right. Just back in. If I may, just say one thing, because we're on the same wavelength, and it's not this technology that we're frightened of or anything. We want to embrace it, really.
Yeah.
There's a colleague of mine here, John Mercer, who was involved with what I was mentioning to you about the early video recordings and so on. And he's seen what has happened over the years from those in the middle of the 1990s, the sort of cameras that we got and so on Iris 2, you know, all those sort of things, and how they've now developed. And there's no doubt at all that you can look at those the videos, you can examine your track and all that sort of thing. It still doesn't alter the fact that somewhere along the line you have to own that piece of railway. You can't just look at a video with it. Right. Because you will be looking for the wrong things on it. You want to be so that, right, when we get to that particular point, when you're watching the milepost and all this sort of thing, you get to that particular point, I want to know what's happened to that since last week, since I saw the last recording. That's what you need to do. Unless you know that railway, you probably won't even notice it.
But what you also have to bear in mind, I think you and John know, that in British Rail, you have an apprenticeship scheme that you would come in, you'd learn the rails and you build up that knowledge and experience. We're dealing in a world now where we've got to get those people in now and build them up, and the technology helps them give that information, makes the job a bit easier. That's all we're trying.
They expect technology as well.
Yeah.
Yes, of course they do.
Well, you know, it's not just people coming in, but it's people who use phones. You know, now you can get lost and know where you've got lost on a Google map. I saw Google Maps, and you know the joke that we had was you now can get lost and prove that you can't find your way out of a paperback. But technology is with us. It's part of human nature. People come up with better cat traps. It's like, you know, someone was remarking to me that the trapped hovercraft was there. Some of you might remember it. And it was there because people thought we'd come to the end, literally, of the line of steel and steel wheel. No, we didn't. It's like gas turbine trains. Tried twice. Oh, HSC won't work. It's a stopgap. We're still running HSCs 50, 60 years later. So technology changes. It's about how you can get it to work, but you shouldn't be reliant on that. You look at what we do, it gives people their information, then they question it and say, well, actually, did you need to do track section? The ballast shoulders there, or is it a geotechnic issue? What have you done with the drainage, for example? But I think the challenge of rural railway in the UK is it's a Georgian technology, Stephenson's gauge, that's what he saw, built by Victorian speculators and then managed in remorse by Edwardians. And then British Rail came along and they tried to figure out what to do with four very different companies. You see it today. Great Western Route at the back of one of them, which relied on waiting for a Brunel, waiting for someone to come up with a big powerful steam engine or someone to come up with that. Then you've got British Rail that tried to develop a more disciplined approach. And then you've got privatisation where, you know, they thought, well, actually, why do they want privatisation? They thought, well, if you give people money, free of treasury restraint, they will then come and do that. Well, it hasn't quite worked out. And you've lost that experience. But how do you get that experience and give them the tools to acquire that information and then learn from that? And it's very challenging because we had a very good apprenticeship system, very good graduates and non-graduates, and that worked. You know, Network Rail is trying to replicate and doing a very good job of that. But it's the patience to do that, and technology is one way of helping them do that and work together. These are used by the same teams. It's used by a guy who's 65 to a graduate who's 23, and they work together. But they're learning because of that, because they will ask them a question. Right, it's 40 degrees. What happened? The experienced track worker will say, that's because they cut the trees. Or the experienced track worker will say, well, actually, maybe the ballast isn't there, or maybe it's a hot surface and the ballast is a darker colour. Small things like the colour of the shingle or the ballast, that will affect temperature. But a younger engineer wouldn't necessarily know that because they'd have thought, well, surely we got to a better stage when we got more uniform discipline. That hasn't quite happened.
But just go back to putting a temperature monitor on the road, and that's fine.
Yeah,
I love that idea. That's a really good thing. We used to do that by just attaching a thermometer to it, and then somebody went and look at it. Now, the reason we put it in particular places was because we knew that there was likely to be a problem if the rail temperature exceeded a particular point.
Yeah.
Now then, you have to then understand what those reasons are, and the person being told that you've got to the critical rail temperature has to understand why that monitor is in that position and why that can be a critical rail temperature. Why is it at that particular point? And there can be many, many reasons. One of them, because it needs to be re-stressed. You're not sure of the stress free temperature. We tamped it last week and it wasn't DTS. All sorts of things. We've got wet spots in it. We've got intermittent gauge problems, all sorts of things with it. Absolutely. You have to understand all that. Your monitor is a part of that total system.
As I said, we're a part of that mosaic. There's a much bigger mosaic. We're simply giving information. You were saying a manual thermometer. We've got to have 4 people. We don't have the luxury in the UK or Western Europe of having lots of people who will do that.
Can I just say that I think the fear is behind all our thinking is that you're preventing people having to go on the track to do something dangerous. So they can just go and stick the thing in the rail and go, and then you get them off it and chop it up to be quite done. So it's all an emphasis on getting people off the track, not going anywhere near it. And that's helping to with other things as well.
Yeah.
To create a situation where we no longer have people who know what that pit track looks like, smells like, tastes like. You know?
I think what you
and that familiarity is going because more and more things are being produced which present some idea that you take a photograph or a video. If you don't know what that is a video of because you've never been there, it really doesn't help. And it's very useful. But I think we've got to be very careful that we're not getting small steps all the way. It's not going to be talking about many people going on the track and looking at what is there.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting tired of 2 years. But,
I think what you will find is, we speak to people, they've done a track walk and then it's a case of option. So it's a case of when you need to be there, it gives you the information so that when you do need to be there, and that's where it is. And that's what we find the user case. It's boots and ballast because do you need to be there unnecessarily? You need those 4 people watching you. They could be better off doing something else. So that's the challenge that we have, and that's what we're trying to address.
very useful piece of kit, but it's.
No, I'm aware of that,
But it all helps.
Yeah.
But it mustn't accumulate into a whole load of technology that stop thinking. But as people on high think they're really going to try.
I think what they'll find is they need more engineers, and I think we've found, particularly as I said about Fujitsu and Horizon, that people now can't hide behind technology. I think that's what you're trying to get at. They'll try and say they won't. I think Network Rail also, before that, has put the engineers in. They're trying to get an experience, but also make sure that when they have to be there, they are there. They don't want to be there unless they have to absolutely be there. It's important that we have a safe railway, and that if people do need to be there, they do the track walk, they do the handover, they're there, and they can prove that handover because they can see the temperatures, and then if they are questioning it, sometimes they go back on and then they check the data again.
But they will only know that they're familiar.
Yeah, and that's
They'll only be familiar with that if they go on the track.
yeah, and I don't dictate. I'd love to dictate who goes on the track, but I can't. We sell one part of that mosaic. That other part is up to them. But from what we're told, they are trying to encourage them. That's what I've seen. They know the track. So when I ask, what is it? How many switchings, crossings, all that kind of stuff. Is it pan rules, elastic? They know that their track. Usually, phone me a section manager. They've done a section walk. That's what they phone me up. So yeah, but we're finding there's a mix of it. Life is far more complex than what the doom mongers would like to have. To believe.
Okay, well, I think this fighting of getting men on the track and technology will go on all night.
Yeah.
So I think we've reached a stage when it's that time of the day. We're already losing some people to catch trains. So I think I can thank you very much indeed for coming this evening. Sorry we threw you in without any preparation. Local circumstances taking care of that one. So sorry to put you under pressure as soon as you came in and dive straight in. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. Richard, you haven't done a vote of thanks for a long time.
Oh, no, I haven't.
And since you haven't told me who was going to do the vote of thanks, you give you the vote of thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That's what I'd like to.
Right, no worries. Well, I was asking the question about confidence and making sure that, you know, we didn't become too reliant on it. People like pulling my leg about whether I'm any good at technology, but I'm probably a bit better at it than most people think. Anyway, Vasquez, setting aside that your problems for getting here, this talk is like a lot of other talks we've had where it's added to our general knowledge of the railway as a mechanism. I was going on before you arrived about a number of different talks like that. So every little thing, although it seems to be about something that might be obscure or maybe not on the face of it terribly interesting, it actually is quite interesting and it builds our knowledge up. So tonight we've had our knowledge built up a bit more, especially those of us that maybe were more used to a keying hammer than a 64-ton magnet. It's built our knowledge up very well. It's certainly built mine up. I actually have at home a couple of track temperature gauges and good like that, and they both read something different on my on my central heating radiators. I've got them side by side. They give different indications, and neither looks very accurate. But this looks far more accurate. I think we'd be interested in knowing, in seeing a lot more. I don't know. Maybe seeing any catalogues or paperwork that you could send us, because we'd like to put a little bit in our news lines, a little bit more. I write an account which I'll send you about the meeting. But basically, you've brought us up to date with one particular aspect. I know one or two people of us are very up to date. Mark, for example, seems to know quite a lot about it, but Mark knows a lot about a lot of things. And Mark, I mean, you're detected from all the experience here that there's not cynicism, but awareness of how one could be misled if one tries to believe the computer too much. So we hope, in a way, that tonight's meeting has been helpful for you in that one of the things in the permanent way institution that we're getting our heads around is feeling that actually as a body of people, we've got the expertise to influence the system. So instead of the system tossing us about with, you know, all the rules, we say, well, these ought to be the rules, not those.
I'd like to take it on to the product acceptance meeting.
Well, yes, I might not be able to do a vote of thanks there, but we hope that we fed back to you so that when you're at a product acceptance meeting, you can say, well, I've met a lot of engineers who think this and need to be mindful of that and want to make sure that, you know, that, okay, they're providing all the data, but we aren't being misled by it, and that you still need to train people. Sounds to me as though the, you know, various maintenance engineers that you do meet, quite a lot of them are quite sort of sharp on this sort of thing. So thank you very much for a most interesting talk. We've had other talks about most interesting things that we thought weren't going to be perfect. I don't mean that we didn't think yours was not going to be perfect. For example, back in February, we had a talk about Greece.
Yes.
It was actually really interesting. This has been really interesting too. So thank you very much. Jeremy will look to invite you further in a minute, I hope. But it's been, I've enjoyed it, and I'm not really a railwayman, as people will remind me. So you know, we've done well, and I'm glad you made it, and I hope you've enjoyed coming here. Thank you very much. We'll give you a round.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for those at home who joined this evening. Good turnout at home as well as here. So thank you very much. We covered all the other business. Just remind you, Wednesday, the 5th of June, Philip Holman, the Cambridge area works. Read into that what you can. You can come and find out exactly what has been going on the 5th of June. So unless anyone's got any further business, we shall close the meeting, and thank you very much. We'll see you on the 5th of June. Thank you.
Thank you.